Go.
Hi, I'm Darren Aquino. Welcome to our sixth episode of Cold Wind Talkers. I'm Darren Aquino, John Frantangelo. We know him as Johnny Pizza and me, the Cricket. We got a special guest today. I'm still excited. Names I'm going to fumble because it's a very exciting moment for our special guest. Let me just tell you about us again. We're sponsored by Triplevibes Radio and Code NYC Magazine Media Group, which incorporates CV19, the new mag that we created, talking about healthcare and a variety of things connected to the COVID and healthcare and the effect it had on different people because we're in different times in America. And then we got Sunrise Magazine, another proud sponsor and supporter, part of the media group. And then, of course, with my co-host, friend, and combat Vietnam veteran war hero, John Frantangelo, made the book The Last Goodbye. It's a one-of-a-kind book, a must-read, and you're going to see more and hear more about it. As you know, we've done some episodes about it. I'm just so excited to tell you about our guest, and I'm going to get to it because I got to do the promo. And you're going to be excited too. If you're a race car fan, you want to not miss this show today because you're going to hear the behind the scenes from our good friend Terry SABISTON, who's going to tell you about the Daytona 500 as the director. And it's going to be great. And so we're going to begin our show. And then we're going to have a couple of, as we always do, over here at Cold Wind Talkers, we tell it real, we tell it true, we tell it right here. And this is not fake media or anything like that. Whatever you got to say, that's within the scope of what we're talking about. For, we cater to disabled veterans and disabled Americans and the circumstances they encounter in American society today. And today, because we don't have the luxury of being in the studio together, we have to do it through Zoom and Skype. And that's good too, because everybody here is playing a great role to help bring this broadcast out to many people. And, our disabled veterans are very important. All veterans are important, but those who suffered the casualties of war have been overlooked. And as an advocate of 35 years and the national chief and CEO, I figured when we start this show, me and Carl Benavius and John, that we would have both sides, the advocate, citizen, and the patriot veteran, so that we could reach that audience and you can tell your story here with Cold Wind Talkers. So without any further delay, here he comes. Get ready. You got to gentlemen, start your engines, get ready, because here he comes, Terry SABISTON. Terry?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Yeah, Terry SABISTON here. I'm the motorsports director at WNDB. My real job, and I started working here 19 years ago, I got hired to do sales. And just through the dedication of going the extra mile, I've ended up as assistant engineer, motorsports director. I do high school football, big part of what WNDB is. We're part of the Southern Stone Communications Group. We got 6 stations here in Daytona. We got 7 in Valdosta, Georgia. We have several in Huntsville, Alabama, Jackson, Tennessee, Live Oak, Florida. So we're spread throughout the Southeast with our radio stations. But this is our headquarters for Southern Stone Communications. And I've been privileged to work there, as I said, for 19 years. My real job, I tell people, is selling radio advertising, but there's a lot of fringe benefits. And one of them is when I get to be part of what Daytona International Speedway is for all the races. If there's something happening at Daytona International Speedway, I am there. I'm struggling with this a little bit today because we actually have WeatherTech Championship IMSA testing going on at the Speedway. And due to COVID, they're not letting anybody in. So I'm keeping an eye on the speeds and what's going on out there right now on their tracking. And you can follow along with IMSA tracking and scoring online. Jimmy Johnson is one of the drivers out there today, and we'll talk more about that. But I've been part of the motorsports group broadcast group for about 14 years. And I've learned to surround myself just like with successful people that know what they're doing. They're excited about what they're doing. And that's the fun part of my job. I work with a guy called Hill Overton, who goes back to being a track announcer at Rockingham and Darlington and all these other tracks. And he was the guy who got Tony Stewart and uh, Jim Hendrick and Gene Haas all in the same room together that formed Stewart Haas Racing. And he's one of my mentors, and he's been was at the one of the first NASCAR races and has been covering racing his whole life. And he's I think 82 years old now. So that's my mentor for racing. I grew up with racing. I lived in North Carolina, and I delivered the Greensboro Daily News. The motorsports writer lived on my paper route, and he got a free
Wow.
paper. He's got a column in the paper. So I would.
Is he still getting that paper?
I don't know. I don't. That was a few years back. That was back in the early '70s. But on Thursday morning, he would be standing on his front porch with 2 tickets to Sunday's race. And so I got to go to all the races that were within 100 miles of Greensboro, which is Rockingham, Charlotte, Wilkesboro, Martinsville. And you got to remember, I was a young man, only 12, 13, 14 years old. So I had to deliver Sunday morning papers, and then I'd hop on the back of my brother's motorcycle and we would go to the races. On the back of those tickets, it had complimentary /press. So after the race, I could go up and watch the post-race interviews in the press box. So I was in the press box when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, when Richard Petty and Bobby Allison and David Pearson and Cale Yarborough were winning the races. And so now I have media credentials. I get to be a part of those people doing the interviews, and it's an honor and a privilege for me to be there. My family's been involved with racing. My brother was a race car driver. My sister was a scorer.
I lost your sound. Terry, I lost your sound. Could you hear me? I don't hear you, Terry. I think we had a technical issue here. What is
How about that? There we go.
I got you now.
I don't know why.
Terry, but also let me ask you this. Before we get to further your career, you're also a veteran and a veteran family. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was born into the military. I was born in Great Falls, Montana. I have no idea what Montana looks like. I left there when I was 2. I never lived anywhere longer more than a couple years.
I always wanted to go to Montana.
Yeah, someday I'll get back there. But the first assignment my dad had that I remember was he was assigned to go to Yale. And we lived in New Haven, Connecticut, while he went to Yale and learned Japanese. He learned how to speak and read Japanese. And
that was for the military?
Yes, we ended up moving in 1961 to Japan.
And what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Air Force. My dad was in the Air Force for 17 years, and then he transferred over to the Army and got 5 more years in the Army. He was OSI and CID, which basically is plainclothes military police. Dad never wore a uniform. I saw him in a uniform only one time, and that was the day he was sworn into the Army. But he wore a suit. And Carl, it tells you the story about how he met me. I was wearing a suit that day, and I'm pretty comfortable wearing a suit because even as kids, he would take us with him. In Japan, we were treated as dignitaries. Did not know this until a few years ago. My dad was actually a spy in Japan for the military. When a Russian ship would come into port in Japan, the customs was the local chief of police, and they would go out and go through the ship, the Russian ship. When they came off the ship, my dad would meet them and debrief them on what they found on those Russian ships. So my dad knew every chief of police through every port in Japan, and that was his job, was to travel around and grab and get that information. We didn't know this when we were kids. He would take us with us. We had a 1960 Cadillac in 1961 in Japan. We were the largest car on the road.
Yeah, that car was a big car, that Cadillac.
Yeah, big black Cadillac.
And he sounds like he was more CIA than anything.
And that was the only time he was, OSI, or as he said, espionage. Most of the rest of the time he was just, as he said, a cop. And even today he says people don't like him because he was a cop. And that was part of the image too of being a cop in the military. People didn't like you, and they didn't like, you didn't hang out as a kid with anybody else too much that wasn't. Your dad's a cop, and not only is a cop, he's plain clothes, and he doesn't even wear a uniform. You don't know what he's up to and what he's doing.
I think you're the second person that ever told me about a military member being a cop. The other person that I knew was a cop in Italy's military police. And those are the only two that I knew, one personally and you, because usually I just heard, regular soldier or CIA that you transferred in. And like my cousin, he's retired now a couple of years, but he's a colonel, and he was like Ollie North, pretty
Yep.
much. And, he had like three. I said, do you get three checks for that? He worked for DOD, CIA, and the Marines. So I said, there's there three checks involved with that? I said, but yeah, but you did something else, and we're going to get back to that. But you did something that was really exciting. I watched it on television. You were standing there, I know DJ, DJ T. I know him casually, but it was a historic moment. Race car fans and Americans, period, uh, when the big dog himself was there at the Daytona, and you were there. Tell us
I,
about
I
that.
was I was there for last year's Daytona 500. I've been at every Daytona 500 since 1984. My first Daytona 500 was 1976. So if there's a 500 at the track, I'm there, and I'll be there here coming up. But it was last year in February, before all this COVID started, and I was lucky enough to know where the announcement to "Gentlemen, Start Your Engines" was going to happen at, because I've been holding a microphone up to that guy before. So I maneuvered myself to where I was as close as I could get on pit road, directly behind President Trump when he made that awesome announcement of "Gentlemen, start your engines," and then walked back over toward us. It was about 10 or 12 feet away when he turned around and gave us the double thumbs up and the double fist pump, and then hopped into his limousine and led the field around Daytona International Speedway.
I
And
know.
those
What a moment.
moments are historic. It's
They
part of
certainly
history
are.
to be part of the Daytona 500. But
They,
when you
they
add in a president to it, and the energy level is undescribable when there's 100,000 people in the grandstands cheering, and then there's another 100,000 people in the infield doing the same thing, and then the roar of those engines cranks up, and then the Thunderbirds fly over for the national anthem. Is just one of those experiences that you can watch on TV, but unless you're there, you cannot feel it. You cannot understand it. And the roar of those engines adds another factor to it. The jets going over are loud. The roar doesn't stop for several hours. And that's what's just amazing about it. These guys fire those cars up, and they don't stop except for tires and gas for 500 miles. It's flat out racing. But it was an experience to add President Trump to that in a way that you just cannot imagine unless you were there. Watching it on TV was awesome. I recorded it and played it back, but being right there when it happened, I get excited about it.
It's exciting when you're a patriot and you're president. It's like when we were down at 9/11, because when we talk privately, these when I was down at 9/11, and the president came down there in New York, it was exciting knowing. And that time and period in our country was a very I don't know how to express the mood of what that was like. America was attacked on American soil in a major city in the country, something that it doesn't happen ever. And this happening, and citizens, civilians in buildings were killed needlessly out of terrorist attacks. And the commander in chief comes to assure you that we will solve this problem. And you got all the first responders there. My brother's a police officer. My nephew's a police officer. My future son-in-law is a police officer. My kid friends growing up, firefighters. That was there. They were the first due that came, because they came from Queens. They came from all the boroughs first, and then they came from far and near. And that moment, you see, these are historic moments in tragedy and in joy to celebrate. And after that, I was at the game because it was World Series time. And I was at the World Series when the president threw out the pitch, and they brought out the flag from the tower.
Yeah, it's adds inspiration to it. I've been at the track when Bush was there, and I was actually there when Richard Petty won his 200th race, and Ronald Reagan was there. It was an experience to be part of that and part of the pomp and circumstance of that. But it's just an amazing place, Daytona International Speedway. As I said, right now we have cars on track out there, but But let's switch over to the veteran and military background. And
That's what I want to go to, and I wanted people to hear that. And it's always those are important moments in our history, and it's always good to just reiterate that to an open audience like here on this forum. Again, we're coming to you live from Cold Wind Talking. Darren Aquino, John Frantangelo, and our special guest Terry Saviston, um, who's the motor car director for the Daytona 500 and Motor Racing Pier. Those are my dogs in the background. They just want to say hello. And so we're going to get back to, he's also a veteran, comes from a veteran family. So we're updating everybody as you're coming in now. And Terry was just telling us about all of the wonderful things. And he's going to reiterate again. So we're going to continue with his family background and his service to country. Terry?
Yeah, I grew up in Japan, spent 3 years in Japan. I went to Japanese kindergarten before I went to English kindergarten. We lived off base, and that was
Really?
quite an experience. And
I can
so
imagine.
I learned how to count in Japanese, and that's about it. But it was a good environment to learn to socialize with the Japanese, and also just in general, because I moved around every 3 years. From Japan, we came back and was based. Dad was based at Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, and we spent some time there. And then Dad transferred over. My great uncle was a colonel in the Army. It was a commander at Fort Leavenworth, and he convinced my dad that if he transferred over the Army, he'd become a warrant officer, and within 4 to 5 years, it would increase his retirement pay probably twice as much. So he was at E7, I believe, when he transferred. He became a warrant officer, and he retired as a chief warrant officer 4 when he retired in 1972, 5 years later. Now, with that switch to the Army, Dad did get a trip to Vietnam in 1969, and I have memories of that. It was a big year for the United States in a lot of ways, and one of them was the space program. Also, I grew up in the shadow of the space program. My granddad was Army Corps of Engineers, and he was an engineer at Kennedy Space Center and built the launch pads. And his last job was the head engineer or inspection engineer for the vehicle assembly building. So I literally grew up in the shadow of the space program. So in 1969, when those guys were walking on the moon, my dad was halfway around the world in Vietnam watching them. And I get a little emotional because he wasn't here. He wasn't there. We had to sit there and watch without him. But we knew he was halfway around the world, just like everybody else was watching him. We didn't know if he was coming back. He lost 2 roommates while he was there. It was a time where you didn't know. He left for a year and we didn't see him. We got recordings of him. We got pictures of him, but you didn't really know what was going to happen. And it's part of being in the military that nobody really understands, that loss, that potential loss is always there. It can happen anytime. And people put their lives on the line for our freedom. And
That's right. Freedom was not free, and they don't give as much credit to that group of veterans in that era of time. I grew up like you. We're a year apart, you and I. And my brother's friends, like the older guys that we knew, they were the guys that served, like John, our co-host here. It was challenging. We saw friends, my brother's friends that didn't come back, and we all knew them from a neighborhood, because we're talking about New York City, close neighborhoods where there's groups of kids. And the older guys, we called them the older guys. And, they were 18, 19, and they never came back. And a lot of disrespect went to some of those men in the later waves until it ended, until it was brought to an end. They got disrespected. Over 50,000 men were killed fighting under the direction of the commander in chief. And no, the stories I hear even now today, I get emotional because 7 generations of my family fought. And I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank your father for his service, your cousin, your uncle, because we come from these families that built the great United States. So I always like this opportunity to get you to share so that our audience gets to hear the real deal, from the veteran, from all of the tragedies that you go through. We go through many. You and me being the same age, watching your dad. I was making my communion around that time in 69, 68. I was left back here, so I was like 9 years old, but 2, 3 years later, the other guys are off, and they're not coming home.
Yeah.
And they died.
My brother in the draft, he was 5 days off when they, they drew a number every year. He was
Right.
five
I
off
remember that.
being drafted. The number was 5 days after his birthday. So they drew a number, and that was the day they start drafting. So he missed being drafted. But if it had been 5 numbers earlier, he would have been one of the first people drafted that year. But and a lot of his friends were, and that was, he was 5 years older than me, and here was his friends, joining the military, and there was a couple that didn't make it back. And like I said, my dad lost a couple of roommates while he was in Vietnam. And Dad didn't talk about Vietnam a lot when he came back. That wasn't a story. I've got him to talk about it lately. And one of the stories I just got out of him in the past year, he was way north in Vietnam, and he was trying to get a flight back to towards South Vietnam, and he couldn't get one. He'd been waiting for half a day, and a guy in an OV-10 said, "Well, I'm headed that way. You can ride with me." And an OV-10 is like a scout plane. It's a small plane that goes out and scouts. And so he got in the plane with him, and they went down to the end of the runway, and they sat there for a few minutes, and a C-130 gunship pulled up next to him. And they said, "All right, we're ready to go." And instead of going south, they took off and they went west into Cambodia. And the
Oh, wow.
OV-10's job was to draw fire so the gunship could take out targets. My dad had no clue that's what he got himself into. He was
Oh,
a target.
wow.
He literally was a target. And it was the OV-10's job to go over the hill and fly in and draw fire. And then the gunship would come in behind them and take out whatever fire was shooting at them. They said they did
Oh,
that
wow.
for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. They didn't get shot or didn't get hit, but they were the ones that were setting themselves up to get that attention. And then finally they headed south. And he said, if I had ever known that guy was going to do that, I never would have got on that airplane. I'd have waited another day. But you don't
Gosh.
know when you're in a combat area what's
No.
next. It's unpredictable, and you don't
You,
know.
you know Johnny's story, right? And
Yes.
his service, and uh, he had to pull three guys out in the midst of fire. He lost his cousin, and then escorted that body home. And imagine being there with your family. I mean, I can't fathom that. It's one thing you're waiting for the family member, but escorting the body home to your aunts and being part of that when you're 20 years old. You know, I, I still I stagger and stumble thinking like, how does that? Boys fought like men to defend this country, and then they were spit at when they came home in the later because they challenged that army and that time frame. But at service, that's why I admire John. I admire every veteran, because here's the deal with veterans, and I say this to all you veterans out there: how grateful we are is that no matter if you get into combat or not, when you went in, because of the unstableness of any given moment, we could be attacked. They showed us that at 9/11. So a soldier is a soldier, and at any given moment, he's going to be in action. And the fact when they enlist, not always guaranteed in getting into action, they're ready to go. And that's what we must look at. They went in to serve. Not everybody has to go, and sometimes there's no need. They put enough people there and it's stabilized. But if that changes, these folks and other folks need to know that, because some people undermine that and like, oh, well, he didn't fight. He was ready to fight.
Well,
He's a young man. They went in. And now today we have women as well. So you got to embrace the courage of the men and women today. We're a different America, and women are stepping up. And I'm just so proud of them. Kids and cousins I know, and girls and friends' daughters. That's just a wonderful statement about how people feel about this country. And it doesn't matter male or female, they're going to defend the country. So I just like seeing that.
yeah, and that's basically what I did. My dad got out of service in '72, and I joined the service in '78. So I went 6 years of not being in the military after being brought up in the military. And here's part of let me explain some of the transition of what it takes from being a military to civilian. I was a Boy Scout when my dad was in the military, and we would do military training as Boy Scout activities. I knew how to break down the M1 rifle, just like you. You probably know how to break down the N1 rifle, John. I learned how to do that at a very young age. And at 11, 12 years old, we would go do military training. When Dad got out of
Really?
service, Boy Scouts wasn't the same to me. it just didn't have the organization and the stable military attitude that I expected it to be. And that was a transition for me, that as a 12, 13-year old, that I saw literally, that you wouldn't think that a Boy Scout would see that perspective, but that scouts wouldn't change that much. But from being a military Boy Scout troop to a non-military Boy Scout troop was a big deal. And it didn't seem to fit right. And I never really fit into the Boy Scouts after that. I actually ended up starting my own Explorer troop in computers a few years later after my dad got out. And that's another story. But I ended up joining the Air Force in 1978. I went in open electronics. I ended up working on instruments, autopilot, and flight controls on F-15s. It was a non-combat era. There was no war going on that time. I'm what you call a gap guy, GI Bill gap. I have no GI Bill except for what money I put in, which I spent here at Daytona Beach at Embry-Riddle when I first got here to Daytona. But it was you never knew. I mean, one day we went to work and they said, line up by your jobs and count off 1, 2. And we did. And they said, all right, 1's go pack your bags. 2, you get the airplanes ready. I was the 2. The 1's, you went to Saudi Arabia with the airplanes. And we did a show of force and flew around the Middle East with F-15, showing that we could mobilize and be there in a short period of time. I was part of the 1st Tactical Fighter Wing, the 71st Aircraft Maintenance Squadron. And like I say, I've taken F-15 apart and put it back together again. I worked phase docks. One of the most exciting things I did was launch truck. We actually took a truck and put a F-15 radio in it, and the pilot could call us with a problem while he was still in the air or when he started up engines. And we would meet him at the airplane or talk about the problem while he was still flying. And we had parts on the truck to repair that. We designed that. I was part of the design of that. That's now how every fighter squadron operates. It's part of what's standard operating procedure now. But I was the prototype for it when it all began, and it was an experience. We got to go in. We were there from the first time the first plane took off until the last plane landed. It didn't matter how long the day was. You stayed on that truck. You learned. My job didn't have as many problems, but I learned how to do radar and radios and engines and hydraulics and all the other jobs on the airplane. And that you learned what being a team was about in ways that you can't understand in the civilian world. It's why I have so many jobs in my job now. I mean, I'm sales. I'm the assistant engineer for the radio station. I'm the van driver. I'm the motorsports director. I do high school football. I'm the maintenance, facility maintenance, keeping the building upkeep and the property upkeep. I was out talking with the guys who cut grass today, showing them an area of property that we hadn't had cut in over 3 years. So I'm totally involved, and that's what the military taught me, was to get totally involved and be a part of the whole operation. I'm lucky enough to where Southern Stone Communications, our owner, Paul Stone, was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam. And he talks about flying an F-4 before it had a gun. You went up and you only had missiles to go out there and fight with those. That was in the early days when the F-4s were flying, and there was a lot of them being shot down. And that's part of the heritage of what our company is too, that we have a Paul Stone who owns our company and who runs our company and is part of a veteran that tells you his job was to go out and kill people. And that's
Yeah.
a tough thing to say, but that was the truth.
That is the truth. I mean, my cousin, one time told me, because you're talking about all these stories and me not being able to serve for the obvious reason we spoke about, having the leg length discrepancy. And I was eager to serve back around this because we're a year apart. So I wanted to serve. And back then, they were promoting back in the 70s, be all you could be. I wanted to be all I could be because they were going to pay me to be all I could be, but they wouldn't let me be all I could be. So, he would tell me stories that while he's a Marine and he's doing CIA, he'd go to like Greece or in the mountains. And one day he told me, he says, one day you might see me on television, just forget about it. I said, what do you mean? He said, you might see me dead in the rubble. I said, what? What does that mean? He said, well, there's a lot of things going on in the world. And, he's older than me. He's like, Joe is 71. Joe was 71. So he was there and talking to John who texted. He was there in 67. He started in Vietnam and he left like, I don't know, 5 years ago. So he did like 35 years and he retired a full bird colonel. And when he had to go to Desert Storm, I went and got a set of fatigues and I went and got colonel pins and I put them on. And I said, I'm ready to go, baby. I said, so I went to meet him out in Jersey. My cousins had a party because this is now Desert Storm and Desert Shield. I bought the T-shirts and everything, and and I saved them. I still have them to remember that period. And I was so worried. I said, I guess I get my chance now because you're like a boss, right? He was a lieutenant colonel then. And I said, I can go now, right? You could get me on the plane. Look, all you got to do is give me a gun when I get there and I'm good to go. I could fool him with the outfit. I said, he made a big joke if I said, look, Cousin Darren's ready to go. And I was. But those stories he would tell me that he'd go into the fields and he'd go with the binoculars and doing. He says, and one day, I can get killed by an enemy, and you might see me there. Just forget about it. I said, how could you tell me that? I can't comprehend that. Well, this is war, and I'm a soldier. Yep. So I get it when you say about your father. My cousin was there from Vietnam, and then again in the wars later on in terror, Desert Storm, and in these battles, these conflicts that we get in. So when your family and Johnny, we all have something in common. And to all you veterans who might be watching right now, I'll just take a little moment here to tell you, we're Terry Sabiston, John Frantangelo, and me, Darren, the Cricket Aquino, and Johnny Pizza. We're having our special guest, and we're just updating and talking to our veterans out there. And we're coming to you live from Triplevibes Radio. We're Code Wind Talkers. And to any of the veterans out there, if you're watching, you can go to my website at www.adaadvocates.com. You know how to reach me. A lot of you folks, well, just Google Darren Aquino. There's an avenue to find me. To make it simple, if you're playing this back or watching it on YouTube later, you can get me. And if you're in crisis, if you're one of our recent veterans who came home fighting the war on terror, keeping America safe, don't feel that you got nowhere to go. You have somewhere to go. You're loved, you're cared for, you're respected. All America loves you. President Trump made that clear. Our veterans come first. That's how it's for me and my family. That's for John. That's for Terry. We feel it. We love it. It's American. And to those of you family members, we want you to know we're here. If you see something, because we did a show and it's important to bring this out because it's working. We're reaching people. A veteran, he's going to be on the show. Chris is going to be on the show. And you're going to hear different tragedies of veterans who were even, imagine, still enlisted, having disability issues that have not been solved. And I'm sure the president doesn't know about it because he puts veterans in a high priority. And we're doing everything we can now. But this veteran, I want you to know this, folks, he was in crisis. And his wife and other family members are sitting with him. But when he got wind of my advocacy, his cousin reached to him, and then we spoke. And when he told me, and he was so happy that he was talking to me, that he was going to kill himself the day before, what do you say to that? What I said to that was this: don't ever feel that again. You always have somewhere to go. America's heart is open to all veterans. It didn't look like that before. Different administrations done different things, but this administration was on track to help the medical needs. Never before was there any place, any time, anywhere. That was the action to take, and we still got more to do. But to all of you members and family members, if you need a place to talk, there's always a better way. Ending it all is not what we do. Because somebody let you down, we're here to lift you up. Because we're grateful. We love you. We appreciate you. Freedom was not free. And I'm the first guy that want to pay back in anything I could do for you. Because I come from that military family. And here at Code Wind Talkers, Triplevibes, and every affiliate with us and associate, Code Magazine, Sunrise Magazine, and Johnny Frantangelo, Johnny Pizza, The Last Goodbye. This means something. This is your fellow soldier, your fellow American. He knows what you're feeling. He's ready. And soon as we're set up better, and we're in a live audience with you, we're going to take your call wherever you are. You're going to say whatever you need to say because we don't do fake here. We do real. Right now, live time for you in real time. Whatever it is, we're here for you. And I just want to say that So we're gonna get back to the show now, but we always take time for you, guys.
Let me just
Terry?
let me just interject here. I
Go
spoke
ahead.
to Chris. I spoke to Chris last night. He has TBI, traumatic brain injury. Okay,
Yes.
and
From an
I think,
explosion.
yeah, and he was telling me, you know, how he felt, and like you said, he was ready to do himself in. But after our conversation, he felt 100 times, 1,000 times better.
Right.
So he's going to be keeping contact. So that's what we're trying to tell everybody to do, that to contact
Yeah.
us.
You
Contact
see,
anybody.
like with
Contact
you,
anybody
he
who's
felt
a-
it again. With you, he felt it again. So I had it, and then he felt good, and then again he was. So we got to keep on top of that. We got to show that we're there every day for you. We're there every day for every veteran.
Right. And it helps to talk to somebody who's been in the same situation you've been in, because you can relate so much better. You know what I mean? And I think I think it helped him a lot last night. But I'd like to get back to something that Terry
Okay,
said
go
before
ahead. Go
about
ahead,
the
Pizza.
about the M1 breaking it down. Okay. I never dealt with the M1. I heard about the M1 through my father, who was in Marines, okay, and during World War II over in Iwo Jima. He mentioned the M1, which was supposedly a good weapon. But we were trained on the M14, which
Okay.
to me didn't make any. I'm going to tell you two things. We were trained on the M14, okay, and they were using the M16 in Vietnam. So it didn't make kind of sense. I said, why would you train on a different weapon? Get the feel of the weapon that you're going to be using over in Vietnam in combat, right? And I mean, sure, they must have had maybe some M14s. The majority of the M16 was given out to everybody. I was issued the M60. Now that I can break down. Okay. Well, anyway, I did 53 years ago. Okay. But
That's the machine gun, right? That's the machine gun, the M60.
Machine gun, yeah. But the and plus the 45. But here's another thing with the training. This is why the military should really focus what I'm saying right now, okay? Because when AIT, Advanced Infantry Training, we spent almost a year training on the 106 recoilless rifle, which is not a rifle. It's like a big cannon that's on a Jeep, okay? Almost a year training on that. And it wasn't used in Vietnam because of the terrain. They had a couple of them there. But why would you waste a whole year training us on a weapon that it's only maybe used 2% over in Vietnam? So these things don't make sense. So that's why they got to get their heads together out there in the military and say, oh, these guys are using train them on the M16. These guys are using this weapon, train them on that weapon. Not something that went and wasted a whole year on something that we didn't even use. You know what I'm saying? So they really got to get their act together. We'd be 10 times better than we are right now, even though we're the greatest in the world. It would be even better. I just wanted to bring that point out.
I would have liked to stay on the M60. I like a big machine gun. I actually shot that in Pennsylvania at a range, and I went through the guns, and I said, I like this. I like that. Oh, I want to try that. And boom, 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 boom. That
No,
was
it's not. That's the 50. 50
okay.
caliber.
Well, yeah. Well,
no.
that one was ooh.
I got to tell
And that was an incredible gun.
A little funny story before we get back to Terry. Terry, then you take over. But I was at a place to eat about 2 months ago, and I had my Vietnam cap on, okay, and this elderly couple walked over to me, and they said, well, thank you for your service, right? So I was talking to them, and they were, I'd say, about 80. The guy was a veteran too, and I told him about the book, and I gave him my card, and I get a phone call, but she didn't leave me her number. I didn't get it on my cell phone. I got it on my landline, and she's saying to me, John, I'm the person you met at the restaurant, and I got your book, she said. I'm going to read it. I didn't read it. I'm going to read it. But she says, I seen the picture of the M60 machine gun. She says, now I know what I want for Christmas. I want an M60 machine gun. She says, an 80-year-old woman telling me this. And she says, are you ready to be with me, to back me on this? I thought that was kind of comical, so anyway. But anyway, get back to Terry. And I just wanted to bring a little light into
The M1 is a good gun, though. I had one. That was they called that the sniper rifle. The M1.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I had one.
Can you imagine a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds tearing it apart and put it back together again?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fun to see.
Yeah, and that's the way it was. But and then too, one of my dad's job, he was in charge of the firing range for a while. So I learned the perspective of he carried a 38 with him. That was his carrying gun as a cop. And I was cleaning that gun for him, helping him clean it on the weekends. That was part of our life, was that weekly cleaning of the gun and making sure it was locked up and safe, and gun safety. And I think that was an important part of our life today. Dad still carries a gun, and he has a concealed carry, and you never know that 90-year-old guy is carrying a gun around with him.
90.
He carries it well. Yes, he just turned 90 last Friday, and
God bless him.
That's great. God bless. That's a wonderful thing. I mean, in his service, that is great. I mean, and that's good that you had early training. I mean, today we're in challenging times and uncertain times, uncharted waters, crazy people in the streets, destroying, looting, shooting, senseless. Today, that's why I learned young from some old school Italians that was big on hunting. So I was like 14, 15 in the grocery, and on the winter weekends they go upstate and they go into the woods, and they'd have handguns, all kind. They would practice with their handguns, but they go with their long arms, their different sized rifles, and they go for deer, they go for rabbit, they go for pheasant, and I got to shoot all these guns and learn from these old school Italians that were like really focused on shooting, the art of shooting. And, I got privileged. So when I learned to shoot, I got pretty good at it. And, I like it today even, I like to just go out to the range and shoot. It's a good pastime. It's just good stuff. Terry?
Yeah. Part of being in the military too is the people you meet. And I have to always make this comment that if it hadn't been for the Air Force, I never would have met my wife. We've been married, be 38 years in January, and I met her when I was in the military. And maybe it was the uniform. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what it was. But I thank God for those putting me in the right place at the right time to meet the amazing woman that I share my life with.
38 years. So what were you, like 22?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. That's good. I love to hear those stories. And I want to show everybody a quick surprise. Come here. Just come here a second. Everybody was asking. I got a lot of social media, and everybody knew that my uncle was held in a nursing home so they could steal his pension benefit. And this is my uncle Fernando Gout, Army veteran, who was also a musician. And he was held captive up in the Bronx. We finally got him home. New owners took over. A lot of things went on. So your family member might be, don't give up. We fight. We don't take no for an answer. This is a government of the people, by the people, and it will surely work for the people if we stand on those grounds. And that's what we need to do. Fernando, say hi to everybody.
Hello, how are you?
Fernando.
Nice
God
to
bless.
see you. God bless you.
So we got him home. You can go back over there. We got him home, and everybody, everybody was saying, great, he's home. They saw some pictures on my social media, and they followed the story. And this abuse happens constantly. And coming out of New York, we saw what happened in New York. And because he's a veteran, I wanted to point that out. How many veterans are in nursing facilities being robbed and pilfered of their benefits when they're already getting government resources? And this is why we bring this up, because we talk about our disabled veterans, and those of you like who are able and sharing and or have a portion of disability, you're a guiding light to our new members who are coming home and struggling. And that's why I like to stay on the topics of the military. Well, we're very excited about the motor car racing, and that's all important. That's why I wanted you to see that, and the people to see that he's home, he's doing well. If you look at the picture online, you'll say, how did they do that to him? He had a lot of horrendous things happen. Medical neglect. We got to get him his dental. He doesn't have 100%. Veterans, you got to have 100% to get dental. He doesn't have that. So what does that mean? There are things that are ridiculous. If I would have made the Congress, but we're not done yet. These are the things, the wraparound plus. While I was campaigning actively, I talked about a plan for our veterans, having full packages, having for different types. Some people think it's morbid, but when it gets like lawyers get down to the brass tacks. If you lose a limb, they put you in a percentage category. So do you want the brass tacks of it? A veteran loses his arm, his leg, the government's got to get a bag of money. because this is the way I see it. They lost this in service. You want to give them a check, and you're going to give them a bag of money or a box of money, whatever it takes. If he loses one arm, 500,000. You lose another arm, that's another 500,000. Plus his benefits, plus no taxes, plus his children's college are paid for because and today they're young men because you robbed him of a future and his faithfulness to the country or hers. Today it's him and her. And I'm just, again, thankful to all you ladies out there, veterans. Thank you for standing up. It's courage never seen. But for Americans, it's an everyday practice for us. And I thank all of you women out there who are standing up for this country in these very challenging times. Thank you for your service. And remember, again, you can always reach us. We're always available through everywhere on social media. Google me, Google John, and Terry. I mean, he's out there. We're all here for every single veteran that needs an avenue to speak, to share. Don't be consumed. Be relieved, because we're here for you. Terry, take it back again. Go ahead.
I also want to mention the veteran suicide hotline that's out there. You can Google that number, but it's not just for things like that. For any other needs that you have out there as a veteran, they're there for you. I got one other veteran I want to talk about, and that's my father-in-law. He passed away a few years back, but he was in World War II. He was all the way from the beaches at Normandy to Nuremberg for World War II. Was involved with a tank operator and turned down a Purple Heart. His tank got hit. Everybody was killed but him. And he refused to take the Purple Heart because he said, I don't deserve it. I survived. Those guys didn't. And it's those veterans out there like that inspire us. Ben Busby was his name. And I'll never forget when he passed away, saluting him there as he laid there in that coffin. It was a moment that every veteran should be honored with. And
that's right.
It's something that, he lived a full life. He had, challenges in his lifetime. Was back in the day when you were sick, he was in I'm trying to think, in the hospital where, when you're going to, as a young man and as a teenager, and they put him in the hospital to die, and he survived. And he went on to join the military in World War II. And literally, think about it, from landing on the beaches at Normandy all the way into Nuremberg, he made that trip. And not a lot of people survive those trips. And he had the opportunity to tell us about it. And that's what you need from your veterans, is to reach out to them and get them to tell you those stories. I do it with my dad every day. Whenever I call him, I try to pry some more information out of him, because they don't talk, and they didn't talk, especially the Vietnam ones. And those are stories that inspire us, that give us a reason to think about why they did what they did. And maybe it'll inspire somebody else to join the military and be a part of it. So reach out to those veterans out there and ask them those stories. I got great stories. I can tell you some things about working on F-15s that I'll never forget. I got
well, that's why you're here, Terry, to tell us some stories.
I got to tune an engine up to full power while it was tied down to the ground. I was out in Vegas for 2 weeks, and I only had one day where I really had to work. My part of the plane was working fine, so I started volunteering to help out do other things. We took an F-15 down to the end of the runway. We tied it down with a tail hook, and we cranked up the engine to full power. When we were running the engines at full power, we were kicking up dust in the desert a quarter mile behind us. As the sun set, we kicked it up into afterburner, where there was 25 feet of blue flame, 3 feet in diameter, coming out of the back of the plane, and orange flame down the middle of it. Traffic was stopped a half mile away on the highway, watching us crank that engine up and tune it to 100% and make sure it worked right. So when that pilot got in it, he could go up and fly. I tell people, stress is when you fix a flight control problem on an F-15 and you tell that pilot that he can go fly it at Mach 2. So in your job today, I was a restaurant manager. Somebody might not get fed. That's no worry. I work for a radio station. We're off the air for a few. That has no comparison to putting somebody's life on the line when you fix that airplane. And that's what veterans do every day. They make sure that everything is there for somebody to make that decision on whether they're going to have to take somebody out or not. And you got to have the right equipment, and it has to work right, and it has to be right. Those are what build the character in our veterans. And that's what every veteran has, is that experience and knowledge that they were trained. You don't even think about things the military trains you to do. It's part of you. It'll never go away. Sometimes I'll find myself walking along and I'll have that cadence going. You don't even think about it. It's just part of moving along. You know what I'm talking about, John.
Right. I was just going to say, you got to have a great conversation with my son, who's in the Air Force for 29 years, worked on the F-15, did the body work and the mechanical work. He could tell you a lot about planes for sure. Man. He just retired after 29 years.
Awesome. Was it 29 years, your son?
Yeah.
Wow.
When I was in the Air Force, they had the Star Wars program going on, and it was supposedly secret, and I can tell you now, but every F-15 would go down to the end of the runway into a hangar and sit for about 3 weeks, and it would be modified. And every F-15 on the base went down there and went through that modification. They didn't really tell us what it was about. There was a few of us who knew, and I had to know because I worked on the flight controls, and it actually changed the center of gravity. But every F-15 was adapted to launch a missile that could shoot down a satellite. And that was back in 1980.
Wow.
They didn't even test the first one until 1986. But every plane in the squadron, every F-15 had already been converted over just in case they ever needed one. Even though it hadn't been fully tested to shoot down a satellite, every F-15 could carry that extra heavy missile that could do that job. And those are things in the military that you don't know, that nobody knows until 10 or 20 years later. And that's part of what we have now. Yeah. Yep. There's a lot going on in the military. We will never know. The technology is beyond our imagination. And that's what's so amazing about the military is that they don't let everybody know everything. They let the individuals that need to know how to fix and do their part. But the knowledge is there. And it's amazing how that knowledge puts us as one of the most strategic militaries in the world. And we've got to keep that status to keep us safe.
Right. Yeah, we do. We have to do that. That's why it was so important that this president rebuilt our military, added more finances to it, added more capability to our men and women who serve this country, because we got to always be at a state of readiness, especially now in the challenging times with our enemies. Look what China did. Listen, I had the COVID. It wasn't good. They thought I had it again. I was sick. It maybe had another short version of it. I built my immunes, but because of the 9/11 COPD, and I had the heart murmur. I got rheumatic fever as a kid, so I have like a leaky valve. So these things were challenging as they were learning about COVID. Luckily, the friends and relationship I have with doctors who are working on the cure, things that you didn't hear about yet, I already knew about in March when I got it, shortly after the 13th, when I gave direction to the governor in this state and in New York State, what approach I would take as an advocate, because we have to look at how it exposes people, right? So we have a crisis of homeless in New York. We have a crisis in Florida of homeless, okay? And in New York, there were 66,000 when I came, probably more, because of the reckless behavior of the leadership there. You had 66,000 homeless citizens. Now, it would be fair to say we have armories in New York where the reservists go, big ones, big, huge, in every borough, sometimes two of them. They can house thousands of people. Having 5 in every borough, we could have put them there and used the schools. We take the homeless off the street first was my plan, because they were vulnerable. They were open to the environment, and they were homeless. So their immune system was shot. So these are the most susceptible first. And I guided them and said, take them and put them here. There were some other properties. There was a property, Pilgrim State Mental Hospital, that was shut down. They sold it for $20 million instead of used it for homeless. It had 13,000 bed capability, 13,000, and on 450 acres. They sold it for $20 million instead of use it. I told the governor, take it back, because you can in this time of crisis. Paid them a little money for it. What they got, we could set up emergency, like the president when he sent help to put emergency in the Javits Center, right? This was an open facility that could have been repaired, and we could have checked those people, had the garment district make some of those outfits immediately. Garment district got the best in the country, in the world. our garment district in New York, they move. They're like machines. And they pump out those machines. The people go and test them, suit up those people, put them in the armories around the city, the other empty abandoned buildings, clean them, fumigate them, set them up, check those people first, then start to go to other categories. Now, that was the smartest thing to do that anybody could think of. But as an advocate, I'm thinking for the disabled and the homeless, let's start with them first, because if anything, they're in train stations contacting people for panhandling, and they come in contact. So we would see if they have it or who in that group has it of those, and we would start to eliminate, by treating this one, taking care of that one, separating and dividing, but they didn't do it. Nobody listened. Sometimes the people we elect think they're smarter than us, but that's why the paramount words of our Constitution is "we the people." And so I get very upset. And the one thing I want to tell you about the veterans, because we're going to run over time, because they just talked to me from Triplevibes, and they say, go over time. The show's great. Keep going. So just let me say that. And now here's what, and John knows this because I tell pizza all the time. And one of the things that really upsets me, we all get emotional if we care. We're patriots. Patriots get emotional. Politicians get political. But Donald Trump is neither of those things. He's a patriot. He's a patriot. He's not a political professional. He's a New York patriot who's done much for many. He was there at 9/11. A lot of people tried to rob him of that. He went down to see what he can give to help get things underway. I was down there when he came down. Anyway, but what they did and didn't tell you, you heard about the mass graves in New York and their excuse of the plot between de Blasio and Governor Andrew Cuomo, two of the persons that I'm going to put the organization is going to bring a federal litigation against for high crimes and misdemeanors for the murder of innocent victims known as the vulnerable and protected, a special protected class that were deliberately murdered by putting infected people, that vulnerable people was the caution that was posted out there. Don't put this with this because they can get it. He deliberately, willfully put sick folks with our vulnerable loved ones, our grandparents, our parents, for guys my and your age, like your dad's 90. He could have been subject to the murder conviction. What he did is what Hitler did over with Auschwitz. That's what he did. You put people to go to slow death, to suffocate themselves because their respiratory was being attacked by this killer invisible disease that is disgraceful. But what happened in that is in those mass graves, the homeless veterans that were on the street, they got put in these mass graves. And this is the thing that pisses me off. Where was their final farewell? Where was their tribute? Somebody has to answer for that. And the people that we have to answer for that under high crimes and misdemeanors is Cuomo, de Blasio, Chuck Schumer, Jerry Nadler. These are the representatives on the state, local, and federal level that conspired to challenge this election by killing innocent people, thinking it looked like it was an accident. It's not an accident. You put somebody knowing the condition, you willfully subjected them to possible death because the CDC and everybody else said social distancing. In social distance, here you go, nursing home. You have to take them. He ordered the nursing homes to take them. And here's a little perk for you, $32,000 each patient. That's wrong. That's murder, manslaughter at the least, and they're not going to get away with it. They work for me. I don't work for them. I serve my fellow Americans as a patriot in this country, as an advocate, and that's what we're going to do. And I do this because of the work you guys did, because of the service you provided. This is my way of giving back to you. That's what I do. I fight from this side to pay back you, to be a hand up, not a handout. And I've always prided myself in that because my motivation, like you said, to tell those stories, I'm motivated every story I hear. And the worse it is, the more motivated I am to fight for them.
Hey, Darren,
and that sounds crazy.
Darren,
But
they also got, I'm telling you, they should be accountable for the innocent lives they could, not only from the COVID, but the innocent police that were killed because they didn't honor the law and let the police do their job. How many policemen were killed because these
no
two,
doubt.
these
No
two
doubt. Well,
you know,
if
what I
when we
want to
make
say.
the lawsuit and we're preparing it, aside from this other election one, we're preparing it because those are they came after the president with fictitious stories and they called it high crimes and misdemeanors. These are genuine high crimes by elected officials that put innocent citizens to death. That's what they did. They put them in an infected area. They took infected people and put them with uninfected people that if they caught it, they would die. You don't put this with that if this is the result. But they did it, and they knew what the result would be. Let them prove before a court that they didn't do that, because the evidence shows otherwise. And in their official and unofficial capacity, they're responsible. These deserve prison sentences. Okay, no pension. We're going to give them a pension and send them on their way. Rotten Democrats and rotten Republicans make a deal to save their asses. They affected we the people. Until we die or they overthrow this country, we're in charge.
I mean,
Ultimately, the final.
There's too many politicians bought and paid for, and it's got to be stopped. Somehow we got to stop it.
Well, that's what I'm attempting to do.
When I get these people are selling this country out, and I'm pissed off about it. Okay.
Well, that's why veterans are being pushed aside. You have one patriotic head of house, and that's the president. And the second voice to the president is ours. And that's why they said he's too loved. When Kennedy was loved, what'd they do with that issue? We know what they did there. They broke out the topless limousine and said it's time for a ride. Come on, enjoy the sunshine. Okay? Lincoln did the right thing, joined the country together. How'd that work out for him? Not so good. Okay? The only thing we developed better was security for the elected. But we got to protect the people because that's the strength of this country. And if we let the elected dictate to the people, we're going to go to hell in a handbasket. Ilhan Omar, AOC, they want to break down the Constitution and rewrite it because it doesn't suit them. That little snot-nosed kid she was 28 years old, she's got some nerve. She's lucky she's got a job. She took this place to new levels. And this is why, and this is all relevant. That's why we tell it here, we tell it real, we tell it true. This is not a social media outlet. This is a talk forum where you get to share. Everybody gets their own opinion. And at the end of the show, everybody's friends. It's not, but we're telling what we feel based on what we're in. And that's why this type of show is important to hear from Terry. It's important to hear from John. It's important to hear from me. I'm the advocate. These are the veterans. I fight for these folks that got disabilities, and I'm telling you where the obstacles are. The obstacles are in the people that we elected fooling all of us. Look at that Mitt Romney. No good. It's all about them selling out. We have to make the answer to this problem that helps solution is term limits, absolute laws that you see, they're never going to make it because they're the ones that we're asking to make term limits are the ones that you're saying sacrifice that pension. They're not going to do it. We have to do it ourselves. And there is a part in the Constitution where it does talk about we have the final say. When Congress is in a standstill, we have the challenge in the Constitution where we can overpower them. When they can't come to decision, and they didn't, we make the decision. And we can petition them as citizens. I represent millions of disabled by the organization's founding. I am that voice. And we could make that voice make a difference because we got to start someplace, but we have to start. Because if we don't start, we're going to keep hearing these problems. We're going to keep seeing worse tragedies. But to kill these vulnerable, that was savagery. And it made it look like, well, this is the best decision. Really? You had a decision. The president set up beds, housing, comfort, everything you could say. No, we don't need it. We're going to put them in nursing homes and kill the other folks because the folks we're going to kill, there's going to open up new beds.
How come if we could elect these people into office, why can't we unelect them into office?
Well, that's where term limits will come in, I think. And I think if we got some term limits, that's got to be a factor, and that's going to change this. And I think that's the best bet that we have for the future is get rid of these people that have been there for forever. That's not doing us any good. There's young people out there, and AOC. That's just I think a splash in the paint. But you're going to see somebody replace her. You're going to see somebody else.
I believe that. I believe that. And if I get the new election here, let me tell you, if this court order goes through and I win, I know if I'm in the actual public's eye and they don't steal the ballots like they did in my race,
Right.
I will be that honorable congressman. And let me just say again, I will not serve for, if I have to do 6 years to do the job, let me say it again openly so you can hold me to my word. I will surrender the pension to all disabled veterans, that it will go into the fund, and we'll make sure, or we'll put it to a disability veteran association. So that pension would be $176,000 for the rest of my life every year. But I won't take it because I have mine, and the money I make during the between that, and I get to speak and I make money. I want to get paid for my efforts. I don't want to lay back and get something for nothing, because that's a lot why they do it. So I want you to know, when this is over and I win this case and I become the congressman in the 25th district, I will not take a pension. I will not serve more than 6 years, because I think I can solve the problem, because I'm a very persuasive guy. All these pictures and things and notoriety, it's because on both sides, because I know how to talk to people and talk sense. I'm not here to fight with anybody. I'm here to help solve problems. And I know I could do it. And I could con that wicked Democrat to see what's true. Otherwise, we're old street guys. I'm going to show him two things. I'm going to show him Louis. I'm going to break Louis out of the trunk and ask him if he met Louis. Or we're going to have a reasonable conversation, and he's going to do it that way. Otherwise, they're going to think they're above me. They're there longer. They know better. When they start going down that track, I'm going to kick them down the stairs of the Capitol. And they're going to feel me going out the door, because we're there to do the people's business. It's the people's house, not their house. And we got things that we can fix. China's not going to take over America, and we're not going to let that happen. If the president's got to stay in the house, it's the people's house, and the people want him. They didn't demonstrate enough. They showed more fraud than anything, and irresponsible elected and appointed members in this country that are pilfering from the American taxpayer. And ultimately, folks, we are the true control of this nation. And we have to understand that. We're the final say. The buck stops here. Reagan advised us. You go back to Roosevelt. And Roosevelt, they want to assassinate Roosevelt. And let me tell you, it's just bad people, a group within a group saying, no, we're in charge. No, we're in charge. Because there's too many of patriotic Americans. They don't have enough people to fight us. So it's the illusion of a false power that they think they have to keep you from the power that you have. That's your ultimate, absolute, sovereign, unalienable right. And that's what this case is going to be about. And I'm hoping, the judge, it's going to win on appeal, or it's going to win the Supreme Court, because any interruption of the way I logged it, all of the brilliant minds left out the most important part, the First Amendment, and how they suppressed it and who they suppressed it from, because the lying numbers in Social Security, when you turn 67, they got down, CDC has 61 million accounted, which is not a true number. CDC gets that based on whatever medical intel, but the one that has the true number of disabled is Social Security. Stands to reason. Social Security Administration, disability benefits. But at 67 years old, they changed your check from disability Social Security to retirement. So from the statistic, you went from disabled to retired. So it's like you disappeared. So when you say that can't be that many people, it appears that way because the only calculating system we have changed your status. So it looks genuine, but it's not. So you see, that kind of administrative error makes the numbers wrong. So if those numbers are wrong, there's a critical effect on the vulnerable that will suffer from any adversity. So my job is to help do that. So let's get back now to some other things. We're coming to you live from Triple Vibe Radio. This is Code Wind Talkers, Darren Aquino, John Frantangelo, and Terry Sabiston. And we're just talking about life and where we are, our veterans, who we just so appreciate. We want to thank Triple Vibes for keeping us in. They let us go overtime. We're 20 minutes over the hour, and they're letting us go until they're going to give us a signal, because the show is doing good. A lot of responses here. You want to see Terry, and you want to get in your race car, because, gentlemen, start your engines.
Well, I was going to say, if you want to keep up with me, there's several ways to do it. One of them is Terry Sabiston on social media on Facebook. Another one's at 1150 WNDB. That's the racing station. And I post on Twitter there. But newsdaytonabeach.com is our website for the radio station. And we are a local news station here. We've been on the air for over 70 years. We're the Rush Limbaugh station here in Daytona. And we've got our own Mark Bernier, who's been on for 25 years, afternoon radio. But being a part of that group of people was just important to me in my life. I remember coming to Daytona Beach in 1976 for my first Daytona 500, and I listened to this radio station. That's how you listen to the race. It was the only way you could hear the race on the radio at the racetrack. Now, I'm the guy in your ear at the racetrack when you're out there watching the races, once the Motor Racing Network signs off. The Motor Racing Network covers the race, but before and after the race, that's when WNDB comes on. And I get to interview people like Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and the young drivers coming up. That's what's cool. Chase Elliott, he's our champion right now this year for NASCAR. Young man, 24 years old. I watched him grow up, literally watched his dad win here at Daytona and run the fastest lap at Daytona at 210 miles an hour when he was just a little boy. And he's grown up as part of that, and now he's the champion. He's the best there is, and he's part of our community here too. His crew chief, Alan Gustafson, grew up here in Daytona Beach, and here's a guy who's a champion from Daytona Beach that literally went to the local high school and now is a champion in NASCAR. And the other thing about NASCAR people don't realize is how much they do support our troops. If you go to a race, you see the people in the military there. They're part of it. I've had the opportunity to interview some of those people. And one I'll never forget was Assistant Vice Chief of Staff, a 3-star general. And I got to interview him on pit road. It was before the Busch Clash, which is a sort of an all-star race they run to start off speed weeks. And we were out there doing pre-race, and I'm interviewing this 3-star general, and a colonel comes up and grabs the general by the shoulder and grabs me and starts moving us. And we realized and turned around and looked behind us, and here came the race cars being pushed by the crews headed out to pit road. And it was one of those experiences where you go, all right, I'm in the right place at the right time. And this general, because I was a veteran, took the time to share with me and talk to me. When I got done, the general turned around, and this is something that a lot of people don't know. He gave me his business card. Do you know what generals' business cards are?
No, I don't.
A medallion, literally a coin. And it's a heavy coin. I don't know what it's made out of, if it's solid silver. I know it has some gold plating on it, but it had his 3 stars. It had his rank, and it also had his position as Vice Chief of Staff. Wow. So he said, I don't give these out to anybody. And that was his business card. And I have that today. I keep it. And usually I throw it in my pocket when I put my suit on, because it just feels good to carry that around with me and know that I got that because I am a veteran and because he took the time to share what the troops were doing there at the track and how much that is important to us. People, 150,000, 200,000 people there at the track. And here's, maybe 500 military there. Those are the ones that attract attention, that hopefully get those 100,000 to get their kids involved with the military, inspire them to become part of this. When the Thunderbirds fly over for that Daytona 500 during the national anthem, that's just a recruiting move to make us realize how strong and powerful our Air Force is and how much they're a part of what we do every day. And the Daytona 500 would not be right unless the Thunderbirds were flying over as the national anthem ends.
I agree, because they did that at the baseball game for 9/11, and when they did that, and the other one from the sheriff's department, and when they did that, it reassures the American people the strength of the United States of America. And they fly over in honor. Our president is there. Our military is there, citizens are there, and the flag where we were attacked and the ripping and the tattered shape that it was in, it was held out, waving to let Americans know America's okay. Let them come. If they think they got it, let them bring it, because we're going to show them what they're going to get. And eventually we've done that. But because you brought up those coins, I get a few. I got one from the Bainbridge. I had another one from my cousin and my nephew, Colonels Marines. But they give them to me because of things I've done for them. So I'm very proud of these. I have a shirt too from the Bainbridge, the San Antonio, and there's pictures online. And this is from the sheriff's department. Okay, here's another one here from a group. Here's another one. Here's another one. The Navy ship. So the ones my cousin and my nephew gave me. I met some disabled kids that want to be in the military. So, and it was when he was in, Afghanistan. He was there 10 times, but the kid wanted it. So I gave it to him because I thought it was more important that he have it, because I have my nephew and I have shirts. He gives me everything. I always make him give me something that went someplace with him. So it has, some significance to me. And yeah, I want one of those. I want one. Is that mine?
Hey, this is like the scene from Jaws.
I want one of those. Get me one of those. So the veterans and folks that I help gave me these, and some of them, the craziest things. The wife was, I got stories, and you know what I want to do though, Terry? I want to come down to that Daytona. I want to be. My friends talked about it. My brother, when they used to do that thing going back and hitchhiking from New York to Florida, Daytona was the place everybody went. Daytona Beach. It was like, and back in the 70s, that was like a place to be. And NASCAR back then was big, huge, and it's a place I've never been, always wanted to be. And I'd like to come down there. Even, who knows, maybe one day we can do a show or something where we're all together and maybe get some veterans and some other disabled children. There it is. I want those.
And there you
All
can
right.
see the 3 stars on the back. But
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah, that's a
that's
sweet.
awesome.
That's great.
Oh man, look at that. That's great. That's great. You
And
see,
and
these are
and that's a veteran. That's something only a veteran would understand, or somebody in the military would understand, as a business card. That's a business card.
that's a business card. That is
That's
correct.
going to last a lot
That is
longer than any
correct.
paper business card. But
Yeah, and it's like
Absolutely.
the things that they made for veterans and the Navy. That's great, like the ship, and that was cool. That because when you look at that and the sailor on there, look at that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
That's hot, right? And on it, and this is an organization for veterans, and you can see the back of it. Um, it's got all the branches. Another
Service.
group similar to mine, but different. We're a civil rights group. We're the policing. I created the civil rights police to police the Constitution, because our Constitution tells us about a well-regulated militia to defend, and that's why we have police departments. So I created this and from the organization, and it's a corporation, but it's also a national nonprofit. But its main purpose is to defend that civil challenge that compromised the person that has been compromised with a disability, either through service through the branches of government we have, police, fire, first responders, and military, and of course all citizens. The reason I started in '83, because behind me here you see Ronald Reagan and pictures personally and letters from the Clintons, Obama. I took it off the wall. I won't have that there. I got Bush. I'm debating on taking that off the wall now, because when you come against another president like they did, that's unacceptable. And because I'm a New Yorker like the president, and I've seen the good things that he's done, and I've been in the restaurant when he had his daughter on his lap when I first met him, first laid eyes on him, like in the family restaurant, good friends with my cousin, and they brought me over to meet him. Hey, Don, you know, and he was laughing and he offered, what do you do? After I told him, so you're the Donald, huh? The Donald? Is that it? Like the Donald? So he laughed and he said, what do I do? And I told him I'm an actor and an advocate for disabled. Oh, I says, yeah, I'm the head and founder. It's now just been turned into a nonprofit, and it's a civil rights group, and nobody gets paid. Everybody donates to keep it going. It's more of a subscription membership, and I teach people and give them credentials to be an advocate in the state because we have that right. A well-regulated militia to police what government is not doing. That's why if we're going to have the supreme word, we better have some backup to it. And that's like a well-regulated militia to defend ourselves against those rebels that work in government that got elected under false pretenses. And they're in a governing power, but they're just our, what's a nice word? They're our employees. They're there to manage the people's business, not to take over our business. They don't supposed to interfere with our lives. They're supposed to manage the services to keep the lives stable without, controversy, like the craziness that goes on. But, that's just breaking it down to simple language for a lot of folks out there who are young folks listening. We're on Triple Vibe Radio, Code Wind Talkers, sponsored by Code Magazine, Code NYC Media Group. And again, we got to tell you about this wonderful book to read. These are two esteemed veterans who served this country. Every veteran who has served in this country should be acknowledged around the United States by everybody. Whether you've seen combat or not, you were good and ready to go. And that's enough for me. And a lot of folks enlisted. They enlisted. And the benefit of that is today the things that people want is education and furtherment in one's life. And we have that in the military. So this book here, The Last Goodbye, we can go to, John, what's that web address for that, your book?
thelastgoodbye-book.com.
The last, John?
The last
We froze up? What happened? Are we frozen? We're frozen. Are we out? What's going on? Hello, man. I think we had a technical issue here. I'm still live. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. Are we here?
John's saying
there has been an issue.
John said it's cut.
This is The Last Goodbye. You can go Last Goodbye.
Dash buddy.
There you are. We're back. Okay. I don't know what happened. But you guys froze up, and that's a technical issue. So I don't know. They didn't give me any call yet. We're running over time, so that's fine. So we're just going to keep talking, but we want you to get the